Holler if you hear me. Welcome to a new week here in this corner of YouTube land, ladies and gentlemen. We are going on, and this week is all dedicated to the sexy ladies of the cartoons that we know and love. And since we saw what's been going on with the upcoming release of the Space Jam sequel on HBO Max and in theaters wherever they may be open, and yes, they decided to take away the lovely, lovely bunny boobies off Miss Lola Bunny right here, who probably is responsible for many person out there, many a boy or maybe a girl that became furries, or the very least are open about animals that happen to look like sexy blonde ladies. So yes, we not only are we doing my drawing Lola in the original costume of hers, her original uniform of the Toon Squad, but also with nice supple bunny boobies, and it's okay because she's got the little smile because she likes having nice bunny tits. She likes showing them off in a nice pair of shorts and a tight basketball top, playing the Monstars. She doesn't like showing them at the cheetah, though. Makes her feel like a whore. And she's not a whore. Yes, we are. We cash the check and then we show the men what they want to see. Ah, you are a whore, Darwin. Yes. That was Elmer Fudd as Gina Gershon in Showgirls. If you'd like to hear more dialogue from Showgirls as the Looney Tunes, just say so in the chat. Because I know because of Lola, this is the most comments I've gotten in the chat before a stream even started. And that's very, very nice to see. And for all those viewers out there that are in the know and have been around before, say hello again in the chat now that we've officially started the stream. And for all those there that are first-time viewers that are coming around and aren't in the know, also say hello as well. We've got a lot of people in here. We've got somebody up here who's buns up. Got somebody else who's in a little bit of a tease time, and we've got one subscriber up here who likes to hunt wabbits. And yes, Christopher, you're correct. Lola right here is definitely a fur burger. Imagine me being only a 4-year-old in kindergarten and then going to Space Jam and thinking, oh, it's Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes, and then seeing her walk into frame looking like Cameron Diaz in The Mask if she were a bunny. Or like when you first saw Roger Rabbit and you heard the name Jessica Rabbit, before you hear the name and you think, oh yeah, this is what I thought she would look like. Not like a redhead femme fatale with breasts bigger than her head, but like a sexy blonde bunny lady like this. And nope, we do not see her nude in Space Jam. The movie was only PG. And I did see a website that was whatculture.com that had 10 sexy moments in PG movies, and Lola right here was number 4. Of course, number 3 was Cameron Diaz in The Mask, and number 1, I can't remember what it was, or number 2, but I like to think that another one I remember from that time was the Flintstones movie with Halle Berry, being mid-90s Halle Berry being mid-90s Halle Berry in a kids movie. Where I think we for all those who don't remember what I'm talking about, just Google Halle Berry the Flintstones, and even the music video for the B-52's cover of the theme song had Halle Berry in it, and being her beautiful ebony self in 1994 shape. So yeah, it's all the more reason why David Justice deserves whatever horrible accidents or bad life moments happen to him for beating her like the piece of shit that he is. Yeah, look that up. Sure, around that time she was married to Atlanta Braves star David Justice, and he smacked her around. And in response, it's okay to go and smack him around a little, preferably with a bat. If you can borrow one of those bats that Sting would use in the late 90s, go ahead. It's an eye for an eye. Yes, yeah, yabba dabba boobs. We got somebody saying here, yes, yeah. Wait, if you weren't, well, then again, look at the Flintstones back in the day. Like, there weren't people who looked at, Wilma and looked at Betty and weren't thinking something, or, like little kids watching that and being like, what's happening down there? Same thing with me seeing Halle Berry in the Flintstones movie. What's happening down there? Or, I think that's why I hope they don't do another Flintstones cartoon, because like with Lola Bunny, that they'll do that and then they'll make them, they'll be as ugly and overweight as Fred Flintstone, or they'll make them into anorexics with lesbian haircuts who bitch about the patriarchy all day long. It'll be like Terminator Dark Fate, but in Hanna-Barbera form. So let's hope the Flintstones just stay a relic. And if you thought that what they did with Lola and the Space Jam sequel now, that really does. If you hated what they did with the Lola Bunny character on the Looney Tunes show a decade ago, wow, it actually somehow got worse. How they found a way to make it worse than Kristen Wiig being Kristen Wiig and slapping a Looney Tunes character on her annoying shtick. It's but that's enough talk there. Remember, this whole week you're going to be seeing sexy cartoon ladies like this. So yes, you will be seeing Jessica Rabbit eventually. You will be seeing an underrated one, I would say, is Miss Hollywood from Cool World that came out in the early 90s, not too long after Roger Rabbit, which was a sexy blonde Jessica Rabbit type character. In which the considering how much Cool World failed at the box office, that's why after that was when Cameron Diaz made her film debut in The Mask, and that's how you do a blonde Jessica Rabbit well, and there compared to Cool World. Although yes, still a memorable image, so you'll definitely be seeing me draw Hollywood sometime during this week, and whether or not she'll be posed like this, you'll have to see. I got something else to show to you. And for those viewers out there who don't see, Monday is the day that I do a regular time-lapse art post for my series Draw on Target. And today's target I drew was of the one and only Mad Titan Thanos. You see here, we've got these little rounds of I do 3 different ranges at 3 different kinds of ammunition. And the closest one I do is with my slingshot using wood pellets, 15 rounds. And you see here, we got the only one with the pellets, because the wood pellets I use on my slingshot are the only ones that pierce the paper. So we got 1, and then the rest, we got 1 missed, and we got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we've got 10 out of 15 hit. We've got 1 that missed, and then the other 4 didn't even make the paper. All right, and you notice there's some other indentations like up here and here came from the other things I hit. Yes, that did round. I did hit, but the darts or the balls that they use in these Nerf guns, they just go off, but they don't pierce the paper. They don't damage anything. Like my this profoundly amazing piece right here, the Nerf Rival. Yes, this gets 8 rounds of softball style pieces that you can stick in the barrel right there. Instead of the regular kind of darts that Nerf pieces use, this one uses these yellow golf ball looking things. And yeah, this one goes 90 feet per second, hence why it's got a safety on it. The safety's on, now it's off. And since it only takes 8 rounds, but the first time I used them was last week, and 2 of those 6 rounds I have not been able to find in my room where I do the video, where I do the target practice. I use these as the furthest away. Since this has such a velocity of 90 feet per second, this is the first range I shoot from, and the furthest from was this, and all 6 times got it. Up next, ladies and gentlemen, is the Nerf Modulus right here. Yes, and the magazine clip. I think I got all of the frames except 1 round in here got stuck in the magazine, so I only got 9 out of 10, but all 9 I think hit in the video if you check. And funny thing about, see this little extension here? It's supposed to go under your shoulder or to place it in your shoulder, so you can have this right here and the other one right there and really hold it, so it's like some kind of a automatic weapon or some kind of rifle. And you actually have to use 2 triggers. This is battery operated, and then you pull this trigger. Another fun thing, take the magazine out, and say you have more than one of these magazines filled with the proper darts, you can go and clip it up in here, so you can have a spare for those, tactical games of Nerf target practice. Yes, it's a Nerf AK-47, says Nick. Well, since Nick was the one who was generosity got me this piece off of my Amazon wish list, I had a whole arrangement of Nerf pieces on there, and it was my birthday a few weeks ago. He got me this and the Nerf Rival, so I'm definitely profoundly grateful for that. And we actually got a piece right here. This little dart was stuck in the magazine, so we'll take that out and put it in here. Oh, yep. Now we'll get this boy out of the way. And I want to show you, yes, this one here. I'm going through the big characters, and I actually do feel kind of stupid that I went and did a video where I draw the Punisher as a target after I did that video before I remembered that I had Punisher comics on me, and I went through my long boxes and found I had these right here, which was the first issues of back in the early 90s. The Punisher was profoundly popular to the point where he was one of the few Marvel or DC characters outside of the major ones that everyone knows, like, you know, Batman and Superman and the Green Lantern Corps over in DC, or X-Men and Spider-Man over in Marvel, that had multiple monthly titles going on simultaneously. In the 90s, Punisher had simply The Punisher, and then he had Punisher War Journal, and then there was the third title, which started, cover dated March 1992, which means it was on the shelves when I was born in February 1992, The Punisher War Zone, which ran for a good 40 issues until all three of the Punisher titles were canceled due to their popularity waning. In the mid-90s decline of the comic book industry, the speculator bubble burst, and they were all canceled the year before Marvel officially filed bankruptcy. I remember particularly having these early issues of the Punisher Warzone, and yes, I do like the character, and the perfect choice for a writer of the Punisher in the 90s, Chuck Dixon, was the writer on this comic. But I remember getting these and getting them at a convention I went to in Florida. It was at the Radisson Hotel out in Orlando, Florida. This was on account of the artist here, John Romita Jr., or simply JRJR. And since it was the 90s, they do have a gimmick cover where it's not just that it's a wraparound cover of yes, this is the thumbnail for my Draw on Target Punisher video. I took a copy of this, and this was a thumbnail where I put the captions over it. But you see, he's got those two Uzis, all the clips going everywhere. But then you notice, see that little hole? That little hole is for the logo, his white skull logo, and the inside cover is this 2-page spread where you see Mr. Frank Castle right there firing away with his pistol, and then that's the guys he's supposed to be firing away at. And all this, these are both separate images from separate pages and separate panels of the comic that they put together to make this image in like a kind of Photoshop way. And this you see right here, the back inside cover, you see him right there just firing away at somebody with that Uzi, one of those Uzis, and we get a nice black and white preview of issue 2's next cover. And I'll show you where little piece inside here. Okay, it's the title page. Here, it's one of those centerfold style 2-page spreads of the Punisher. Only the dead know Brooklyn. Yes, very interesting sort of Charles Bukowski kind of a title or line. It sounds like that would be in one of Bukowski's poems or one of his books. There we go. There he is firing away. And you see there, they take that and turn it that way. And the kind of drawing style of John Romita Jr. you see right here, most people would know him from being the artist who co-created the Kick-Ass comic, the comic that became the movie Kick-Ass. And you'll see here profoundly why his art style is perfectly cultivated for this street level vigilante kind of characters. Like he first really became this kind of drawing style when he took over drawing Daredevil in the 80s and was the definitive collaborator on that time when the writer Ando Senti was writing Daredevil, and was actually able to do something memorable with the character besides just trying to continue with what Frank Miller did with the character and making him interesting in the early 80s. And you'll notice, look at that panel right here. There he is firing away. And look what they did. They just took that image, mirrored it, and there's where you see this is the Punisher with his pistol. And these guys here are another page, I think, earlier in the comic is where that comes from. Maybe not. Maybe it's... And this guy here that the Punisher is supposed to be following, there was a time in the 80s and 90s when the Punisher had his own gadget expert like Q called Microchip. That's supposed to be Microchip up there. And he's wondering, the Punisher doesn't see there's Microchips going off somewhere. Where is he following him? He follows him down the subway system here. and sees that he's through the cross building with the binoculars that he's talking to somebody. He eventually corners him about it, and he asks that, oh, it turns out that Microchip is going to see a therapist about all these things he's doing, this equipment he's making to help this man go and slaughter people by the dozen. And if you remember the third film they did, The Punisher Warzone, which was happens to be the name of this comic, that was the one where they actually do feature the Microchip character in the movie, and it's played by Wayne Knight, Newman from Seinfeld, or he was also the fat guy in Jurassic Park, the one who gets killed by the Dilophosaurus. That's why that's why they especially see that kind of drawing, the way that Romita draws faces. You see that, callous, blunt-nosed Guido thug kind of face that the Punisher is supposed to have. That's why it's perfect. His drawing style is perfect on that. And that's why I see the Punisher and I think of a Ken Shamrock. Those out there who don't know, Ken Shamrock was the original star along with Royce Gracie in the UFC back when they started out in 1994. And then in the mid-90s, he went over to the WWE, and he was there built on his legitimate fighting skill in mixed martial arts in America and over in Japan, except he didn't really have any mic work talent to work the mic and work the crowd besides his in-ring skill. So that's why he never really got big outside of the mid-card. And on top of that, he actually was the first guy to ever perform the ankle lock in professional wrestling. And he tried to have a feud with The Rock when The Rock was starting out, and he used the ankle lock on him, but The Rock's popularity just grew and zipped up, so he had no idea to go in better. And now this guy here is supposed to be a rival to the Punisher called Shotgun. And he's Shotgun right here is an example of doing a race swapped duplicate of an established comic book character well, because he actually has a character to him. There's there was a rivalry there and a personality and motivation there besides his race. It's just that he's a character there who is out there to be a rival to the Punisher and to actually try and take him down, because he wants to be the one who slaughters all crime in New York himself and wants to stop the Punisher. It isn't just that, oh, he's the Punisher, but the Punisher is a black guy. And actually, later on in the issues, they get into this rivalry, but they wind up actually banding together, because the plot of these initial issues of the Punisher Warzone that were drawn by John Romita Jr., it does come together where actually it's the three of them. It's, you see this last issue here in the pile. Now it's war. There's Shotgun with the Punisher, and a third guy who's a lowly mafiosa in the Carboni crime family. The Punisher decides to spare this low-level guy's life in exchange for a deal where he's able to where he uses his family connections to trick the Carboni crime family into letting the Punisher in under the name Johnny Tower, so he can go and kill the Carboni crime family undercover from the inside. But eventually the story is sniffed out. He actually is able to get the Carboni family to flee to this island home they have somewhere in South America. So then that's when Shotgun, Punisher and his new enemy Shotgun, along with the Carboni flunky, decide to band together and attack the family head on their island fortress, which sort of plays out like the third act of that Steven Seagal movie Marked for Death, where it's your vigilante hero, his black friend, and an inside man, except there the third guy is a Jamaican FBI vice officer, because the whole story is about Steven Seagal trying to fight Jamaican drug lords in suburban Chicago. And the three of them are able to get the head of this Jamaican drug posse to flee to his home in Jamaica. So they get together, they get themselves armed to the teeth and kill him in his island fortress, gunning their way in like Arnold and Commando. And not only that, but they behead him, and Seagal returns home to suburban Chicago and shows what's left of his posse in the city the severed head of Screwface. Screwface is the name of the villain. Except it turns out he has a twin brother, and Screwface's brother and Seagal have a sword fight that leads to Seagal gouging his eyes out with his thumbs, breaking his spine over his knee, crashing him through a wall, crashing through another wall, throwing him down an elevator shaft, and he's impaled on a pike at the bottom. And Seagal's one-liner is, "I sure hope there aren't triplets." It's Marked for Death. If you like just a rock-solid, well-made, action film, the martial arts and gunplay, I'd recommend them. Yes, I would honestly recommend the early Steven Seagal stuff if you like a good, martial arts or gunplay style, a simple street level crime action film from his first film Above the Law up to his biggest hit Under Siege. Those first five, yeah. And in between, it's like Marked for Death is the medium. That's the middle ground between his debut Above the Law and his peak Under Siege. Marked for Death is also the only Seagal film from his 90s heyday that wasn't a Warner Brothers release. It was done by 20th Century Fox because he broke away from his deal with Warner Brothers because he wanted to go play the lead in Predator 2 that Fox was making that was released that same year, except the director refused to cast him and he cast Danny Glover instead. And supposedly the director claims that he actually would get phone calls from Seagal personally afterwards. Seagal would taunt him with the superior box office figures of Marked for Death over Predator 2 that summer. And then that year, because I think Marked for Death was in the summer, and I know for sure that Predator 2 was Thanksgiving 1990. It speaks to the pettiness of Seagal. And honestly, if that is true, that Seagal wanted to be the lead in Predator 2 and the director refused, I'm actually kind of upset by that because I really would want to see Steven Seagal versus Predator. It's like the next film Seagal made after Marked for Death, before Under Siege, Out for Justice. The third act of there, he finally tracks down the mafia thug who killed his partner into this shitty little home in Brooklyn. He's got all of his thug friends with him. One of them is played by stuntman Kane Hodder. And for those who don't know, Kane Hodder is the only man to have repeatedly played Jason Voorhees throughout the later Friday the 13th films were all Kane Hodder, and since then he's become a horror icon on the back of that. But in the early years after the Friday films ran their course, before and after that, he still works as a prolific stuntman, and he was one of Richie's thugs in Out for Justice, who Seagal blows away with a shotgun before he beats Richie to a pulp and then kills him by stabbing him in the eye with a corkscrew. So, in the question of Steven Seagal versus Jason, Seagal wins with a shotgun blast to Jason's heart. It was And Nikosi Gardir here's in the chat and he says, I actually liked Predator 2 more than 1. And Nikosi, actually agree with you on that because I was strange, though. Those 80s and 90s franchises, I almost saw all of them backwards. I grew up with Predator 2 more than the first Predator. And I saw that film repeatedly, and I actually had like a Nerf pistol that sort of looked like that hand cannon pistol that Danny Glover carried in the movie. That big silver one. It kind of looked like Charles Bronson's pistol from the Death Wish sequels that had the big, but Glover's had a big scope on it, and it looked like that damn thing could blast someone's head off. And of course, there's the great ending where Glover has a shank off with the Predator in his own spaceship, and then 20 more show up. They see him, and instead of trying to kill him, they just take away their fallen comrade. And the biggest one, gives him a flintlock revolver off his waist. Take it. And you see the little plaque on it that says it's from 1715, and that great ending. He walks away. Glover survives the spaceship blasting away. He's covered in what I think is asbestos, and you can make the joke that the experience was so intense and traumatizing it turned Danny Glover white because he's completely covered in soot and it looks like he's in whiteface. And the Adam Baldwin guy from Firefly and Chuck shows up, and oh fuck, we almost had them. Don't worry, asshole, you'll get another chance. And from supposedly that flintlock with the 1715 date on it is a reference to one of the Predator comics that was made. In the 3 years between the first and second Predator movies, Dark Horse got all the big licenses for science fiction stuff around that time. They got Predator, they got Alien, started doing them as comics, combining them. And one of the first Predator comics was set in 1715, where it's about the Predator tries to attack a bunch of musketeers, and he winds up joining forces with like the last surviving musketeer against an enemy, and the musketeer dies, but in him battling alongside him, he gives him his flintlock, and the Predator keeps it as his trophy in respect to a fellow warrior, buries him, gives him a proper burial, and leaves behind his sword, his like space sword, as a token of gratitude to this fallen warrior in an exchange. And yeah, that's that Predator from that comic that was given the flintlock with that musketeer's dying breath and gave that warrior the proper funeral. Is that's supposed to be him at the end of Predator 2 handing Danny Glover the flintlock. It was oh no, the actual universe of the Predators and Aliens are so interesting in the comics that Dark Horse did throughout the 80s and 90s, and sucks that those movies just ignored them. Like I think like the very first Alien versus Predator comic, they did like a superficial adaptation of that for that first movie, the one that the Resident Evil director did, which it's the most like basic plot line of you've got the female protagonist who survives the alien swarm, the predator joins forces with them, and then the other predators show up to take the fallen predator's body away, and they like respect her as a warrior, and that's it. And the Nikosi corrects, we know it wasn't musketeers, they were pirates. It was pirates in the middle of a mutiny on a pirate ship. And yeah, it was that's the pirate who gives the predator, the Greyback, I think was his name, Greyback, his flintlock with his dying breath. Well, at least they revealed more about the engineers in the newer Alien films after 40 years. And Mildred responds to Nick's comment about that, saying better late than never. Yeah, it's then again, it's one of those that is like that Sam Raimi Wizard of Oz movie they made, or the Star Wars prequels, where mysteries like that are probably more interesting than giving them answers. Like when you first saw Alien and they go into that cavernous space horseshoe and they find the chamber where there's that giant albino corpse with the hole in the sternum that was blown from the inside out. You're like, what the hell is that? And the idea of what is that and thinking of it in your head was more profound and memorable than if they had like ready exposition there. Like you watch the first Predator film and the Red Letter Media review of Predator points it out that you don't really get like a cut and dry exposition on what the Predator is, where it came from, and why it's there, and why why is it killing them. They just get this general idea, and it's an 80s action movie that expects us to just infer for ourselves what it's here and why it's doing it. And the sequel does a good job of expanding the lore, and yeah, it gives us the backstory of what happened in the first movie, and it's all through the Gary Busey's little task force deducing what the Predator is and why it's there, instead of it being like a good alien showing up and explaining everything. It was and yeah, Nick says, yeah, they do look a little funny now, looking back and knowing that weird face on the space jockey was just a helmet instead of it being the It was back in the day, engineers actually had trunk noses. Yeah, it sort of looks like an albino bodybuilder elephant. Mm. Oh yes, and Nick confirms, yes, that Predator comic I was talking about. Yes, Nick confirms that yes, the Predator at the end of Predator 2 is also the one from that early Predator comic named Greyback, who at the end of the sequel, he gives Danny Glover the flintlock he got from the pirate at the end, who's his dying words to Greyback was "take it." So it's like the only English he knows is "take it." Like in the Predator 2, all the second one is legitimately, I'd say, scarier than the Predator from the first one, because the way he screws with repeating things back at people before he kills them. Like he's cornering Bill Paxton, and he's repeating when the kid in the cemetery asks him, "Want some candy?" Just repeating "Want some candy" over and over. Or when he slaughters Danny Glover's Hispanic friend and the Danny boy. What would have been weird is if during that scene where the Jamaicans break in on the Colombian drug lord having rough sex with playmate Terry Weigel, and they're going to do a voodoo ritual of cutting his heart out, if when the Predator went later on kills somebody, he he taunts them with repeating back playing the playback of the rough sex noises between the drug lord and Terry Weigel. Yes. Further proof of show don't tell on how the Predator only he's there to hunt and only kill someone if it's a fair fight. Hence why running around in the first movie, that little Latina lady who's there has no weapons and is a sitting duck, never gets a scratch on her. The only violence she gets is when Arnold pistol whips her in the face. And the other one is when he's got a naked, terrified Terry Weigel sitting right there in the corner, and he never lays a hand on her. Yeah. I've heard about the Predator comics and the Alien comics, except I've just always had a general aversion to movie and TV licenses and comic book form because, oh, yeah, that's just something they're going to slap together. It's something that they know that they can just make whatever kind of comic, whatever artist, whatever writer, they can just fart something out and we're going to make a quick buck off it because they know the name. But now, since then, and mainly because almost all those licenses that Dark Horse had, that was like the financial backbone of them while they were off giving creative license to Chris to do weirdo stuff like Hellboy and Sin City and all the stuff John Byrne was doing and Monkey Man and O'Brien and all the other weird things that Dark Horse is publishing. Well, they were Mike Richardson, who started Dark Horse and has been running it since then, is a savvy businessman because he knew that it was worth it to, start out his publisher in like '86 at a little office, and then within a couple years, letting it ride and writing all his money on getting the licenses to Predator and Terminator and Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And he could get, the best and the brightest artists and writers he could on the back of they're going to go do Star Wars, and the symbiotic financial relationship between 20th Century Fox and with Lucasfilm on those licenses that he could make a big bang for their buck trying to put out quality work that expands these universes of these movie franchises and TV franchises later on with like Buffy. And that stuff would be so profitable that then he could go and take the creative and financial risk on, letting us Frank Miller go and do whatever he wanted creatively and do Sin City and write the Martha Washington comics and do, Hard Boiled and all the other stuff he would do. Yeah. And then Nick says he didn't like the fourth one, the Olivia Munn Predator movie, as much as he liked the first three. Yeah, I surprisingly liked Predators that came out, and yeah, because the trailer's like, oh my god, another Predator movie, and it's Adrian Brody trying to do the Batman voice, and then actually watched it, and okay, it's I think it was the burden of low expectations because it was just such. But then they actually the filmmakers in there were smart to keep it a simple. It's a group of mercenaries in the woods. Except here, it's this planet-sized game reserve they've all been abducted to. Hmm. And, Nick says about the fun fact about Seagal wanting to star in Predator 2. Nick says, "Thank God they went with Danny Glover," and Nikosi agrees with him on that one. It's like the fight, the shank off in the Predator ship, where it's Predator with his forearm blade and Glover using the Predator's own boomerang blade disc against him. It'd be like, I don't need your blade. I don't need your weapons, spaceman. And he would just like poke his eyes out through his mask. It was a yep. And Nick's bringing up the great story I had about Mr. Steven Seagal on the set of Out for Justice, where famed stuntman, stunt coordinator, and martial artist Judo Gene LaBelle was a coordinator on Out for Justice, and Seagal claimed that nobody could ever choke him unconscious. LaBelle actually took up the challenge to Seagal about this. With Seagal's permission, he put his hands around his throat and started choking him. Seagal tried to get free. He couldn't. And eventually he went unconscious and supposedly shit his pants in front of all these crew, all these stunt people. Yeah. Yep. Yes, that was back in the day, the glory days of Steven Seagal with Marked for Death and Out for Justice and Above the Law, before Seagal became a weird communist. Yeah, the being buddies with Vladimir Putin, or as he pronounced it, Vladimir Putin, on that interview he did, like right after he was designated like given some kind of diplomatic relation with Putin in Russia. Yes, Vladimir Putin. I can't stand Nathan Rabin as a film critic, but I agree with him in this one line I read from a review once where he said about Seagal used to be handsome in the beginning of his career. Now his face looks like a catcher's mitt that was outlined in magic marker. Yes. And his hairline is so fake. He has the fake hairline like Eddie from the Munsters. Look up Eddie Munster, the little kid on that sitcom, The Munsters, and that angular uppercase M hairline he has is exactly what's spray painted on. And look at Seagal in his early days. There's some like interview he did like standing outside, and he's out there in the sunshine, and you can see his hair like through the top of his hair through his hairline. And suddenly you notice you look at his first film, Above the Law, that's where those photos are taken, and you can see his hair was thinning. And then from his next film onwards, you can like look in close up and you can see there's like it's either some kind of wig or some kind of spray paint, like spray on hair job he's got. Like Tom Arnold did an interview for Huffington Post Live because he was in Seagal's next to last theatrical film, Exit Wounds, playing some like comic relief character, and they were doing a scene on Seagal's houseboat he's supposed to live on in the film. And he's like, Steve, the first 2 inches of his hairline is like all spray painted in because he didn't want to wear a toupee, but he didn't want to look like he was balding. And if you watch the film now on like Blu-ray, you see in close up, you can see that's like 2 or 3 inches thick of spray on to look like he's got a full hairline. And he was like being petulant with the director Andres Partowiak, and he didn't want to rehearse the scene they were filming on the boat, so he tried to walk out of the room and step out of the door, not knowing that the door that Seagal chose was the door that led out into the water. And Arnold tried to like reach out and tell him to stop, but Bartowiak waved at Arnold to not warn him. So he walked out the door and fell into the ocean. And Arnold claims that all that spray paint was like running down his face like it was mascara. And he was just there floating in the water out in, I think, Vancouver, where they filmed the movie. Yeah, Exit Wounds. He's a Detroit detective, and the movie was filmed in Vancouver. And I recently found an episode of Biography on Seagal from 2004, where the last bit is him promoting his album, that one of those albums he did, Songs from the Crystal Cave, and he's talking about growing up in Detroit. You know, my parents were working 2 jobs, and we had these neighbors. They were this big black family that was playing music all the time, and they started teaching me how to do the blues guitar. Out of sheer of needing the money, he got BB King to play with him on his Songs from the Crystal Cave album. Yeah. Yeah. Also, going back to Ken Shamrock and his resemblance to the Punisher, Mildred here also brings up how Tank Abbott was another early like Mark I UFC champion who wound up being hired over to go to defect to the WWF, along with Dan Severn and Don Fry. And, here's one. We got some more talk here. Got some more. I'm going into the chat here about the. To answer Nick's question, he had a question earlier in the stream about, yes, Predators with Adrian Brody and Danny Trejo. I did like that. Although, yeah, the biggest flaw I see there is the scrawny, the one scrawny weirdo comic relief who is there as like he's there as annoying forced comic relief until it turns out he's a serial killer who's just been acting stupid and weak because he's like, oh God, I don't know why I'm abducted, why I was taken here. And then you think about like, why would a serial killer be, top flight game for the Predators? Like all these military commando types, these like the one Yakuza who's mute, the mute Yakuza who doesn't really do anything until the second act where he finds a stray samurai sword, and we finally get to see the crazy mute guy standing his ground fight that we didn't in the first film. The big buff Indian tracker guy who in the second act, he just stops, rips his shirt off, and just takes out his machete. He's just going to stand his ground, but we don't see the fight. We just hear him scream, and the Predator polish off his skull. Well, that's in that movie. In Predators, we do get to see a version of that fight where it's the Yakuza standing his ground, and he sword fights that one Predator. Yeah, Rob Van Dam. Well, he was the ECW guy who then started out. Luke is asking, Nick's asking, do you like furries? No, I'm not a furry, not at all. I'm not a furry. I just know that there's I've been seeing on social media, and yes, there's a big audience out there who want to see, a female cartoon bunny be a sexy lady with nice bunny boobies. Here's and Nikosi says, let's all agree not to talk about that, referring to the Alien versus Predator films. I don't know which one's what would you say is worse between that first one or that sequel they did, where yes, they decided to go and make it R-rated, but the film is so visually dark that you're always yelling at the movie to turn on the light. Like that, I don't know who was like the people in post-production where the contrast, picture quality contrast was so visually dark you can barely see them when they're graphically fighting each other. Here's one. Oh, talking about the Nikosi's got a comment about the alien comics of not going to lie, I read the comics and Newt getting into a relationship with Bishop was the worst thing I've ever seen. Yeah, the little girl who survives the aliens and then she grows up to have a relationship with an android she saw getting ripped in two by the alien queen. And that sounds profoundly gross. That's a little. Nichols brings, yeah, some of the Dark Horse Alien comics were hit and miss for me. Well, that's why I just generally, as a rule of thumb, aren't not into the movie or TV license comics, except like the biggest one I think was I do own most of the reprints in the 90s when Dark Horse got the Star Wars license. They went and bought out. That meant that they had the right to reprint all of the Star Wars comics that Marvel was making in the 70s and 80s, including the nationally syndicated Star Wars newspaper strip. That was, yeah, it was done through the LA Times, then nationally syndicated. And like the first year or so, it was done by this artist Russ Manning. But I got the copies of I got the back issues of the classic Star Wars newspaper strip that was drawn by one of the best pen and ink illustrators that's ever worked in comics, and his name was Al Williamson. He took over the Star Wars comic strip from Russ Manning, and yeah, supposedly uh, Williamson got his start in the 50s. He was the artist on the Flash Gordon comic strip, and he replaced the artist on the original Gordon strip when it started out, its creator Alex Raymond, and then he killed himself by crashing his Corvette into a tree, and Williamson was hired to take it over. And supposedly his run on the strip, on the Flash Gordon strip, was one of the main inspirations for George Lucas in making Star Wars in the first place. And looks like Luke's a furry, Nikosi says. Nope. Both now Nikosi and Nick saying, I'm not a furry. I just know there's an audience out there who like sexy lady bunnies. They like the bunnies are bunnies, rabbits, whatever. They're a profoundly sexy animal. There's a reason they say screw like rabbits, fuck like rabbits, and imagine if you were a guy rabbit and then you saw a girl bunny like this. I mean, no wonder you want to reproduce more than an Irish Catholic family in the 1940s in New England, or maybe a Polish Catholic family in Chicago in the 1950s. Who paid a. Oh yeah, I've noticed that too. Nick brings up here about Chris Jericho and now what he's been doing with AEW. And Nick brings up, yeah, Chris Jericho. It's sad he has that fake ass Steven Seagal looking sprayed on hairline. Yeah. I never cared, and when it comes to the action stars, Nick says, I never cared for Seagal, especially with his rivalry with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I'm team JCVD all the way. Well then, Nick, you'll be glad to say that yes, the difference between Seagal and Van Damme is I legitimately like Seagal as Van Damme as an action star, and with Seagal, it's more of a train wreck fascination. Like last night, I saw what I would say is the most underrated of the Die Hard clones. After Die Hard came out, like every major action star in the 90s had to do their own Die Hard ripoff. And I would say that the most underappreciated was the one Van Damme did, Sudden Death. As action goes into overtime. He's the fire inspector at the Pittsburgh Civic Arena, and terrorists are holding the vice president hostage in the luxury box at Game 7 of the 1995 Stanley Cup Finals, which we all know the 95 Stanley Cup Finals was went the full 7 games between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Chicago Blackhawks. There's the great out of context fight scene that Van Damme has with one of the terrorists who murders and takes the costume of the Pittsburgh Penguins mascot, who's like a lady he knows who doesn't recognize him, and then when he figures that out, she tries to pull a gun and shoot him, and Then they have a big fight scene in the kitchen where he like strangles her by cashing her costume into the meat grinder there. There's of course, the other big fight scene he has in the locker room where he like he takes there's that in the locker rooms at hockey arenas they have those devices, those machines they use to sharpen your skates. He like sticks his hand, like he sticks the guy's hand in that blade, and it nails his hand in place. And then he stabs him in the. I think you remember correctly. He stabs him in the head with a skate. We also get a cameo from Penguin star Luke Robitaille from at that time. And you think Penguins in the mid '90s that you'd want to see Mario Lemieux, like Mario Lemieux is the Pittsburgh Penguins. He is the Penguins' resident Gordie Howe to the point where he retired and now he owns the damn team. Do you think that either I don't remember or I looked away from the TV or yeah, get him. Like, say if sudden death was made and it was, the Red Wings and it was at Joe Louis Arena where terrorists are holding the vice president hostage. Wouldn't you want Steve Yzerman to be, walking into frame and saying hello to the Belgian waffle, to the muscles from Brussels? You'll do that. You'll do that, sir. And don't forget to be careful for your defensemen. So, all the Russian five, they go there and they destroy. Yes, they. You may be powerful there, Russian five, but remember, none of you can do the splits like I can. I give you a wake-up call. You cannot be as strong as I am. And Nick says his favorite furry is Sonic Fox. Yes. I'm definitely Team JCVD. I was recently rewatching that and Universal Soldier, which I never actually watched all the way through. What does it say about me that the first Van Damme film I ever saw was I saw Universal Soldier: The Return in the theater, and I didn't even want to see it for Van Damme. I wanted to see it because Bill Goldberg was in it. Because yeah, it was the late '90s. I was into wrestling, and hey, Goldberg's going to be in a movie. Okay, yeah, that Belgian guy who did the splits in his underwear and Time Cop. If he's in it, oh, whatever. I want to see Goldberg. What would Van Damme's gimmick? What would his name be if Jean-Claude Van Damme was in WCW? I have to see that. Like the Muscles from Brussels is a great nickname, but he would need like the would it be like the waffle iron? Because he's Belgian, it has to be a reference to waffles. And when it comes to my love of wanting to draw Lola Bunny in all of her stacked glory, so Nick's response is, I don't really understand the appeal of boobs anyway, but you can probably guess why. Yeah, well, yeah, we all know that already. And yes, I saw somebody online say that how many women were actually raped by Pepe Le Pew? The answer, 0. He's a cartoon character. It's the greatest generation, the generation that fought and defeated the Nazis from rising to power and dominating the world, that rebuilt a country and an economy from the economic collapse, the Great Depression, and put the guardrails into our stock exchange, into our financial system to avoid another market crash. And this generation is falling over and crying on a cartoon Frenchman who's horny. My God, you people deserve every insult that comes to you. That's why I actually enjoyed that remake of Shaft that came out a couple years ago, because it was just one giant case of snowflake millennial bashing. So, like, okay, yeah, that reboot gets a pass. Yes. And well, Nick brings up Universal Soldier 2 is awesome. I loved Michael Jai White, JCVD, and Goldberg. Well, I'll give that credit to there. That's another thing of people don't really go to see action movies for the acting. I mean, I went to see that because it had a big wrestler in it. And on top of that, you have Van Damme in his last theatrical release, his last theatrical lead role. And on top of that, you also have Michael Jai White post Spawn as the villain. And I remember seeing in the theater, and he was profoundly threatening. I found him intensely scary in that film. There's a guy who's not only is he jacked to all shit, but on top of that, he's been a practicing martial artist since the age of 7. So neither in his physique or in his actual fighting skill does he have to try to be intimidating. He just is. He just is naturally imposing. That's why I think he's a better actor than he gets credit for, because Michael Jai White's scene in The Dark Knight, where he's the victim in Heath Ledger's "Do you want to know how I got these scars?" scene. Yes, Michael Jai White, the nearly lifelong martial artist, is able to convincingly, he's able to convincingly be threatened by a scrawny Australian in punk rocker face paint. Yeah, that's all the praise to Heath Ledger's performance. Well, yeah, Jai White, tiny part, but there's a guy who could really kick some ass, and he's letting himself get threatened by a dude he could break in half by breathing on him. Yes. And yeah, Nikosi, I actually do know about that with the New Deal and people's reaction to FDR and the New Deal. I actually remember there some, I think it was like a New York Times writer. He went on one of those political shows. I think it was like Bill Maher around like the mid 2000s, who talked about the people screaming about the communism of the New Deal, and there are people still to this day who scream about that. And the New Deal was a commie pinko little underhanded deal. And Nick brings up I sing Universal Soldier. Yeah, I finally watched it all the way through the couple other nights, and yeah, I was for Dolph Lundgren being like a robot in all of his movies, and sometimes that's a good thing. Like Rocky 4, yes, that's perfect. In the Punisher movie he did, yeah, I think that worked. He's supposed to be this emotionally calloused death machine, so him being this monotone merchant of death worked. Like the best use of his flat line delivery was that one line in the Punisher where he's finally been caught by his former partner in the police force, Oscar winner Lou Gossett Jr., and he's asking him, "What do you call 117 homicides in 1 year?" And Lundgren's response, "A work in progress." Perfect. And then the opposite end of that spectrum, as soon as he gets free from his programming in Universal Soldier, you get the most crazy, intense, charismatic performance of Mr. Dolph Lundgren's career. Yes, the kickboxing champion with a 180 IQ and a Master's of Science from the University of Australia. Yes, he's you see him just the great part where he's dragging the corpses of his Unisol comrades into the meat locker of a grocery store so they can cool down and re-heal from their wounds, because the Unisols work where their cybernetic metabolism works, where they can heal their wounds by going down to like super freak cold temperatures. And yeah, he literally drags two corpses into the meat locker of a supermarket somewhere, just sits them in there for a while, and they walk out, and they just start. One of them starts stealing a raw ribeye steak from the butcher from the butcher shop back there. Just starts like chomping on it raw. And of course, there's the scene where the love interest and Van Damme, they get into a motel after they've escaped together, and he immediately strips and he needs to cool down, so he immediately strips everything off, and we see rear frontal, we see full rear nudity. But then again, that's Van Damme, and that's why Face Off, Sudden Death. I mean, Sudden Death is a real standout in his filmography because it's the rare example of a Van Damme film from his heyday where he is neither shirtless nor nude. He's fully clothed the entire time. That's a rarity for him. And on top of that, yeah, the biggest example of that being when he completely strips off and you see him fully, a guy who's in love with a man who's as profoundly in love with getting naked on camera as a French art, French art film actress. Between him and like Eva Green, what is it about the Franco-Belgians where they seem to have a must-do nudity clause in their contract? Between Eva Green, the space girl from Life Force, Matilda May, who of course is French, and Mr. The muscles from Brussels, the Belgian. That's why I said Franco-Belgian, Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme. There he is in Universal Soldier, stripping off completely, and then he just wanders out of the motel room naked and passes out in the middle of the street. And the lady, the love interest, has to douse him in all bags and pump bags of ice. I've heard of Manchurian Candidate, but I've never seen it. I know there was a remake in like the 2000s. The original Manchurian Candidate was 1960s, like sometime before the Kennedy assassination, and was controversial because of that. And then, like in the Bush years, the W. Bush years, they did a remake with Denzel starring and Meryl Streep. Yes, the Belgian. That's the that's what somebody calls a Van Damme stripping off on camera in his movies. It's called the Belgian dip. Remember the one he did, the film he did after sudden death, The Maximum Risk, where he's supposed to be, he has a long lost twin brother who's murdered. He was like some kind of underground mafioso who gets killed by his bosses. So he goes and assumes his identity to try to track down his killer. And his girlfriend, his dead brother's girlfriend, is played by the blonde from Species. So of course that means they have a scene where they mount each other in a bathroom. Yeah, but what else do you expect from 90s Jean-Claude Van Damme with his love interest played by Natasha Henstridge? They were going to be nude, and they're going to be thrusting, a lot of thrusting. Either way, you may be repulsed, or you may even enjoy the sight of my Belgian booty on camera. But one way or the other, it is still more entertaining than watching me in action movie with my sidekick, Rob Schneider. He has his next to last theatrical release, which I remember seeing the poster. I thought the poster looked cool when I saw it in the theater, and the trailers looked cool, but I never actually saw it. It was this one film called Knockoff he did, where his sidekick is Rob Schneider, a post Saturday Night Live pre Deuce Bigelow. Rob Schneider is his sidekick in this hustle where they're selling knockoff designer jeans on the black market there in Hong Kong. And it turns out that Schneider is actually undercover CIA. And in the film, Schneider actually has a fight scene. What makes Knockoff special, besides Van Damme in the 90s as its lead, but it was also directed by Sui Hark, who was like one of the major action directors in Hong Kong in the 80s. He directed the Once Upon a Time in China. He directed those, and that was the film series that launched Jet Li's career in China as an action star. And on the back of that, he Van Damme brought him over to go to Hollywood and direct Van Damme's films Double Team. The one he did where he co-stars with Dennis Rodman. The one where, yes, Van Damme has a fight scene with Mickey Rourke in a coliseum full of landmines and a Bengal tiger, and Van Damme's newborn baby is sitting in a basket in the coliseum full of landmines and a tiger. And the ending is Van Damme, Rodman, and the baby escape from the exploding coliseum after tricking Mickey Rourke into stepping on one of the mines by hiding behind a Coca-Cola vending machine, which blasts them to safety out of the coliseum. Yes. And according to Nkosi, the artist who created Lola Bunny was a full-on furry. Yeah, that was Mickey Rourke, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and also the rival archaeologist, the Frenchman from Raiders of the Lost Ark. He also played the villain in the Power Rangers movie. Yeah, Paul Freeman is also in it. Yes. Not to mention something else about Street Fighter, the Street Fighter movie. One thing I recommend you look up. There was actually a tie-in soundtrack for it, including a music video. It was a song called Straight to My Feet by Deion Sanders featuring Mr. MC Hammer. And it features the whole cast from the film in the video. And we see Hammer and JCVD dancing together. Yes. And with that, we have a finished Lola Bunny. Thank you all for watching tonight. New viewers out there, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And all viewers out there, if you like this work and you want to support me, follow the first link in the description below to my online art store. I've got pen and ink illustrations like this available for sale at $25 a piece plus shipping. I've got color drawings available for sale. They are $20 a piece plus shipping. And they look a little something like this one I did of Lola in color earlier. I also have sketchbooks available for sale. Sketchbooks are $25 a piece plus shipping as well. You can also commission me for original artwork. Commissions are $50 a piece, and commissions are the final item for sale in my pen and ink illustrations categories. Besides that, the other way you can help support my work without buying or commissioning anything is to simply make a donation to help support me. You can donate any dollar amount you'd like, and that is the final the first thing you see in my store is the donations category. Besides that, follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. And of course, I have an Amazon wish list link below. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, I'll be live again. I'll be doing more 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, another lovely cartoon beauty. Who it will be? Well, trust me, it won't be for the furries. Thank you and see you, Space Cowboy.